So who is taking that?
I will kick that off.
All right.
So at the last board meeting, you got a primer on our water shortage contingency plan and how we use that to basically inform water shortage stage curtailment declarations and measures to achieve required conservation savings for each stage, and also emergency rate setting to basically cover the measures that need to be undertaken for the different shortage stages and those curtailment actions. So I won't go too much into that tonight. What I did kind of want to just touch on is the water shortage stages that we look at. There's three basic types. There's a short-term shortage due to catastrophic emergencies. That's obviously not part of our discussion tonight. And then the other two are long-term water supply shortage stages due to drought, contamination, failure of critical water infrastructure, as well as groundwater overdraft and seawater intrusion. And so those, the latter two are going to be the focus of our discussion tonight. And the trigger conditions that we evaluate to basically determine if we're in a shortage stage are rainfall linked to recharge, and basically the condition of the groundwater basin. And so whether we're in overdraft, seawater intrusion, and that sort of thing. So those are the trigger conditions that we're going to be focusing on tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and start with the state of the groundwater basin. We are currently in a stage 3, and we've been in a stage 3. I think this is the 5th year for that condition. And that has been primarily due to the groundwater emergency, as well as for several years there was a lack of rainfall and recharge. With the groundwater overdraft, we recently in 2018 had work done through the Mid-County Groundwater Agency. That was the SkyTim study. And what that study showed was that we basically have seawater intrusion immediately offshore, as well as in some of those wells monitoring wells where we have detected it historically. And that, we don't know how fast that's moving onshore, but we know it's looming right outside of our coastline, and that's a serious condition that we obviously need to keep saving water and doing what we can to reduce our pumping until we can get a supplemental water supply to make up for that and recharge the basin. So this figure 4 here shows the results of that SkyTim study, and the big circles here really represent where we see the greatest risk from seawater intrusion, and that's a greater than 50% chance based on the SkyTim study and the groundwater levels that were measured at that time. Since then, in 2018, there was a technical memorandum dated August 21st, 2018 by Montgomery and Associates that showed that of the 13 groundwater wells that we monitor for a variety of things, but most notably protective groundwater elevations, that 5 of those 13 wells are still below protective elevations, and while we may have seen improvements in other wells, we still are seeing that issue. So that gives a snapshot of the trigger condition for the health of the groundwater basin. So we still have concerns there. And then I wanted to touch on the rainfall and recharge. There's several graphs in the memo. The first is the last 5 water year rainfall totals. And you can see that we were slightly above our averages here for the current year. And we do look at a 5-year rainfall and recharge number. So we've had a couple good years and some not so great years in this 5-year mix. But really what this year's rainfall pulled us out of all of our stages based on rainfall and recharge alone. So that gives you a little snapshot of that parameter or that trigger condition. With that said, I want to go to the, this is again the historical picture of where we've been in some sort of curtailment stage since 2012, with the last 4 years here being or 5 years being a stage 3. So one thing I wanted to touch on is emergency water rates. Our urban plan gives us flexibility to declare no emergency rates, even if we're in any of these shortage stages, or a lesser shortage stage. It doesn't have to be a stage 2 rate with a stage 2 water supply condition or a stage 3 rate with a stage 3 water shortage. So that gives some flexibility there. And at this point, staff feels that customer efforts to save water and the behaviors that were learned over the drought have mostly stayed with our customers. We have seen some rebound in water use, but it's not real significant compared to other areas of the state. And so at this time, we don't feel that we need to enact an additional stage 3 emergency water rates on top of our current rates, because people are already, the momentum is going and they're already achieving that 25% reduction that we need with the stage 3 water shortage, without having to expend further staff resources and money on conservation programs. So at this time, we're not recommending any emergency water rates be adopted. So the next step really is for the public hearing to close and to take input from the public on the information presented, and then for the board to declare a water shortage stage, curtailment target, and if desired, any emergency rates for the year 1920. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Any questions from board members before we open the hearing?
Well, I'd actually like Dr. Daniels to go over once again the relationship with how much rainfall, how rainfall is needed, what kind of rainfall is needed to replenish the aquifer, just for our interested customers.
Okay. Yeah. Well, as you may know, most of the rainfall we get evaporates. 67% of the rainfall we get in our basin evaporates in one way or the other. Something like 10% is recharge, but you have to remember that some of that recharge just goes out as base flow into the stream, because you go out there in the summertime and the only thing that's out there is base flow, which is groundwater recharge that's going out into the creek. So it's something like 5% that goes into the ground and doesn't squeeze right out into the streams. So relatively small amount, less than 5%. And it's a nonlinear relationship. That's kind of the average. So in some years, when you get down to we get about 31 inches on average. When we get down to about 20 inches, we're getting essentially zero recharge. And so most of the recharge is when you get a really wet year. So for example, that one year that we had,
51 inches.
yeah, that's a year that we got a lot of recharge.
17.
But this year, even though it's kind of an average year, we're not going to get average recharge. It's going to be less than average, because it takes a lot of those big rain years to pull the amount up. So is that kind of what you were after?
Yeah, because I think, we've had this discussion over the last 4 years or so about the emergency water plan is based on rainfall, when it's really, the emergency is really lack of recharge, I guess, or replenishment.
Yes, yes.
So that's why it stated, even it was stage 3, even during that heavy year of rainfall in 2017. And, I'm not seeing the actual change. You mentioned that there was measurable recharge that took us out of stage 3, 2, and into 0 this year?
Not recharge, just rainfall.
Just
Rainfall, but
no, that's just based on rainfall.
these rainfall numbers were modeled to assume a correlating amount of recharge. And that was done by hydrometrics at the start of this urban plan.
Which was
And, because see, the urban plan before that, urban water management plan before that was based, and the ones all before that were based on surface water criteria. So this was our first attempt to make something represent groundwater conditions more than what we had. I think it's clear that because of there's definite limitations to this, and that for our next urban water management plan, I think we're gonna need to go to protective levels or something more really
Well, even
close to our risk.
Even for our recharge, rather than using some kind of an equation, we could actually run the groundwater model each year
Yeah.
by putting in the rainfall for that year and then, kind of going year after year after year and do that. So we could actually calculate what the model tells us would be our recharge that year. So that would be better than just basing on a rainfall equation.
But I think even better to me would be to use something like protective level.
Well, using the groundwater model, we can actually tell what protective levels
Yeah.
that amount of rainfall
There you
will
go.
produce.
Okay.
In fact, it could tell us, exactly what WASAC and the groundwater, sustainable groundwater numbers are. So
But for now, this is what we have.
this is what we have.
And we
So
can,
so it's the next urban water management plan is the plan for when we update?
it's 2020, which is due in 2021.
Correct.
So next year we'll do
It's
it.
coming soon.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. It's not perfect,
No.
but it is better than what we did have.
Yep.
And I agree with Director Daniels that since we have a model and invested quite a bit of money into making the model as good as possible, that we should use it.
And it should be essentially done by next year when we're doing the urban water management plan. So that'd be
Yay.
a good time to engage it.
Okay. So I think it's time to open the public hearing. So if there's anyone who wishes to speak on this item, now would be the time.
Thank you. Good evening. Becky Steinbrunner, resident of Aptos Hills area. I have some comments. I want to point out that in your latest rate restructuring work, the stage 3 emergency rate looked like it was just sort of incorporated in. And that was pointed out in your February 19th public hearing on your rate increase by Mr. Jimmy Canizaro, one of your ratepayers, that the basis for your rate increases started with the stage 3 rates. So it kind of looked to him then and looks to me now that the stage 3 emergency rates are, as you will, baked in to your current rates that are increasing every year for the next 5 years. I would also like to point out in the technical memorandum regarding the SkyTAM that it says under the discussion of the few monitoring wells that showed a decreased level in groundwater level, that it says, in general, most of the monitoring wells in the area have recovered. And that is borne out in the historic production levels and monitoring levels of, certainly the production levels of your wells, but the monitoring, the levels of the monitoring wells. And I learned that, it was quite an eye-opener when I went on the Mid-County Groundwater Advisory Committee tour of your facilities last year. And we looked at one of your monitoring wells, and it showed that the water level had been steadily climbing. And that is supported by the Santa Cruz Sentinel article that interviewed your general manager, Mr. Ron Duncan, stating that the groundwater levels are at historic highs. It is also pointed out in the draft environmental impact report for the Pure Water Soquel project that, again, in general, the monitoring well groundwater levels in the project area have recovered. And Mr. Cameron Tanna, that is the hydrologist working for you and the Mid-County Groundwater Agency from Montgomery and Associates, has said the current groundwater basin level is sustainable. We are at sustainable level now. So I hope that you will reduce your stage of emergency down to 0. It looks like you've already sort of included stage 3 emergency rates in your new rate increase structure. But I would like to ask, what are the criteria for declaring those 2 wells, monitoring wells on page 8, as at high risk? What are the criteria that were used?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Before the next speaker, I'd just like to address a couple of those items to clarify a couple things and correct a couple misconceptions. The rates, while you mentioned are similar to what the stage 3 rates before this current rate item, the rates are always based upon projected water use and based upon covering costs. So it just so happens that our water use is much lower than it used to be, so the costs have to be what they have to be. Secondly, it's still not at protective levels in at least 5 of the monitoring wells. So that is all. Next speaker.
Colonel Terry Maxwell, a customer and a ratepayer, and a well-informed observer of this board of directors and the activities of Soquel Creek Water District, and well-read on the history, and as some people describe, the negligent history of this board of directors and your
Can you
staff.
please keep your comments to
Well,
this particular item?
My preamble. I fully endorse and concur in everything Ms. Steinbrenner has said. In addition to that, I want to point out that you were premature in your rate increases. Your poop to scoop pure water Soquel plant has not been approved. It's not succeeded in court, and it won't. And it won't because it demonstrates the uncaring negligence toward the EIR process you demonstrate time after time. It also demonstrates the negligence you show and the dereliction of your responsibilities towards your ratepayers who are your equivalent to stockholders. The failure to appreciate...
Does this have anything to do with our declaration of a stage, or are you just ranting?
Yes, it's premature, as Ms. Steinbrenner has pointed out, and it's not accurate with the facts. And what you should be doing is, instead, you wouldn't have a shortage, even consider if you would consolidate with Santa Cruz and regionally consolidate all of the water resources that should happen that would make this entire institution redundant. Sad to say, you've brought this reality on yourself, the negligence of this board of directors for the last 25 years especially.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this item? Which is the declaration of the different stages.
Thomas Stumbaugh, Aptos. It is my considered opinion that the board and the management of the Soquel Creek Water District have no right to pollute the aquifer.
Does this have to do with declaration of a stage, please? Keep your comments to the item.
To the item at hand.
The item at hand, we're talking about declaring with some type of stage, a groundwater stage,
Emergency.
a shortage stage, and that's what the comments need to deal with.
When does the public get to come up here and
This is a different.
say what they
that'd
want
be-
to?
That's at open communication,
Oral
not during this item.
Coming up later.
It's coming up later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I think we'll close the public hearing. Yes?
I move that.
Okay. Moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Yes, sir.
Something I'd like to mention that was kind of brought up by one of the speakers. The last groundwater agency meeting and the meeting at the city of Santa Cruz, both of them have said that if pure water does not happen, then the city water transfer is not sufficient, and therefore this basin will not be sustainable, and therefore the state will have to take over our basin, and the state has said that if that happens, they will cut back all pumping in the basin, and therefore, the transfer will not happen, and certainly the transfer back will never happen, and so that would kill everything. So the people who are saying that, I don't think you really want what you're asking for, because what you're asking for is disaster. So, sorry.
All right. So let's focus on the item at hand. So, yes.
I'd just like to say that I disagree with the comments by Ms. Steinbrenner. on her interpretations of what was said, and I would say that if you look at the actual groundwater levels, and they're like page 11, 17, 19 of the January 23rd Mid-County Groundwater Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting for a plan, you'll see water levels are in fact going down. So I don't know what the comment by comments you're referring to, but when I look at the actual data, I disagree. And that makes a difference in what stage I will support. If in fact the water levels were above sustainability as you've claimed, I would say stage 0, but I don't see that.
Okay. You want to propose a
Well-
declaration of a stage? Or?
May I even contribute to the
Yes.
conversation real quickly? I think it's appropriate to just take a minute and shout out to our customers who've been in stage 3 for 5 years now, that they were doing their job, and without that, we would probably have much more seawater intrusion onshore. I think the other thing that is worth reflecting upon is in the general greater California, I think it was 25 agencies that were surveyed, that during the drought saved 25%. Basically, they were mandated a stage 3 by the governor. Within 8 months after lifting that restriction, they all bounced back to normal use. So I'm not saying our customers will do that once we lift stage 3, but certainly it'll be a burden off their shoulders, and we should be prepared for that.
So, not included in this packet, but the packet from April 2nd, it gives the criteria for the different stages. And although in this packet there was a graph showing the rainfall, but there's 2 other criterias. One is a total production capacity criteria, if there's problems with wells. And then the pertinent criteria is groundwater emergency is in place, which allows us to declare any of the stages. I don't think things have changed that much, and I do think that stage 3 continuation is the right message to give our customers, that there still is a problem. And you know, we are working hard to solve the problem, but it's not solved yet. So I think it's premature to decrease the stage. So I'd make the motion to have stage 3.
You want to include what, keeping the rates at not a stage 3?
I don't think we need the emergency rates.
Okay. So that,
So no emergency rates.
I'll second that. Any other comment?
That's a roll call vote
Right.
too for.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, if you think about it, you know, we've been doing okay for the last few years. I mean, it's not great, but we're kind of skating along on our thin ice. And we've been doing that with the curtailments for stage 3. So I think lifting them is not a little risky, and I think we should continue with what we got, because it's working okay now until we have a sustainable supply.
I'd like to
Yes,
make one more comment too. And also, you know, at one point in the middle of the drought, I argued for a stage 4 curtailment because we fit all of the criterias, and we stayed at a stage 3 emergency level because that seemed to be a doable level for all of our customers and all of us. And the conditions that have caused us to pursue a supplemental water supply have not changed. We still need that project. And I think that, you know, I think we know what that project will be, but we're still at that level. Things haven't changed just because we've had 2 years of, you know, good rainfall. I agree.
Then we'll have a roll call, please.
Director Lather,
Yes.
Vice President Daniels.
Yes.
Director Jaffe,
Yes.
Director Christensen,
Yes.
and President LeHue.
Yes. Next item is the consent.
Can I make a
Oh,
comment?
yeah, sure.
I agree with our general manager's comment about getting the message out on how well people have been doing. So I think, and this is something really for the outreach committee to decide, and for the staff to decide. But I think letting people know that we have a stage 3 and that they've been doing very well at keeping the water use down, the combined message, I think is a good one to give.
Yeah, and I think the important message for the customer is that what does a stage 3 mean to me personally? And so we'll continue to promote that guideline of 50 gallons per person per day, is, you know, something that's going to help us stay about at that 25% reduction.
Okay, thank you. So next is the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the board that wishes to remove an item from consent?
Did we do roll call? I just want to make sure.
We did.
We did.
Okay, sorry, I was listening.
Yes, Bruce.
310,
So that's sponsorship, okay.
Yep.
3.10. Anyone else? Any member of the public? An item on consent that they wish to not have on consent?
I'd like, thank you, Becky Steinbrenner. I'd like the minutes pulled off, please.
3.1?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
I'll make a motion for all the others.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So 3.1, would you like to address us on your questions on that?
Thank you, Becky Steinbrenner. What I really want to bring to the forefront is that on the item that was to be an informational update only, item 6.4, receive update on coordination with City of Santa Cruz on the Pure Water Soquel project. That was to be an update only. Your board ended up taking action, and it's even discussed, stated here, a discussion ensued regarding possible board action for this item. Under the Brown Act, you cannot do that. You cannot take action on...
No action was taken.
I believe there was.
No.
What did you
Look at the top of the
direct
page.
your staff to do? That's
It was an
action.
informational item only. The staff already had guidance on that item of what to do in, depending on what happened. And they gained information, I mean,
There's no motion.
there was no motion, there was
But
no
you took-
vote, there was,
No.
You took action
we took no
to
action.
direct staff.
No, we did not. Staff had been directed on a previous item the month before. That had already been decided. If this happened, then that happened. So this was just informational. No action was taken.
Well, I do not remember it that way at all. I'll have to review your video because it certainly was not that in my recollection, and that's why I wrote the communication that I did
Understood.
to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion for the minutes?
I'll move.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, you do it.
Moved by Director Christensen, second by Director Daniels. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. And then we go to item 3.10. Dr. Daniels.
I'm leery about us funding this. For one thing, it's about stormwater, which I hope we never do, and given the cost of doing it for, 40 acre feet or something, I don't think we'll ever do it. And it's, also, this is about non-potable recycled water, and that's not our issue. Also, it's not going to be here. It's going to be probably at Berkeley. How many people from here are actually going to go to Berkeley to listen to this? I mean, they talk about it being for the Bay Area, and this mentions, oh, well, you know, we're in the Bay Area, but we're in a different Bay Area than they're in. All these others are the San Francisco Bay Area. We're in the Monterey Bay Area. And so I think this is just a waste of money for us to do. So I will vote against it, I know.
Okay. Do you want to clarify anything, Ron, or Melanie, your
Melanie and I took a
understanding of
shot
the
at this. Do you
pros or
wanna
cons
chime
of
in
this?
first?
Sure. Yes, we were approached by a team of people, Professor Lethke and Professor Sedlak and Eric Hansen from the Silicon Valley Clean Water agency, have been putting on these types of workshops. We went to one last year, just in March, at Stanford, that was specific to potable reuse. And then they are coming out with some other workshops, which would include this one on stormwater, another one on centralized and decentralized reuse, and then they're going to do one additional one the next year. I think it's going to be related to, again, reuse and desalination. They did approach us as well as Pure Water Monterey because they do consider us part of the Greater Bay Area. What's unique about this and why we wanted to bring it to the board for consideration was that the level of effort in terms of it's academic as well as governmental agencies and other people who are in the industry coming together to put these workshops on. This one is half sponsored by EPA specifically, and then the other part is they're going out to other agencies to look for the other half. Ron and I thought we would bring it to the board to see if you felt that there was value. At the last meeting when we talked about the community water plan, there was still interest in stormwater, which is, you know, one of the reasons why when they approached us, we thought that this was something you'd want to consider. I would say that they did approach us late last fall, and at that time they asked us and Monterey for a $5,000 each donation, and we said, thank you, but no thank you. They, in turn, had gone out and they've collected almost everything, and now they're asking both Monterey and us to split. So the amount is now half of what they asked us in the fall. I think that's probably all I need to say.
So what's your view on what we would gain?
I think being associated with the agencies that are participating, as well as that it's also being done by a professor from Stanford and Berkeley, are great. I think it's, for us, it's kind of nice to be thought of as somebody. We sometimes get forgotten because we're on the Central Coast, and the Greater Bay Area is our agencies that we do partner with for reuse, for water conservation, and other types of water resource planning. I think in terms of gaining, we will be, attending and gaining information as these go forward, and they are putting together a report. So I think it would be nice that the district was a part of that.
I think it's one of those things where, certainly at the $5,000 level, we didn't think the investment was worth it, but I think in our minds we were like at 2,500. These have often we've seen these things return greater dividends in the longer term that are not immediately obvious. You get connections, you're known, they reach back out to you. So I think that's where our minds are on this kind of thing. And I think we attended one up in Berkeley a while back also on this. I think Director Christensen and some of us went. It was on potable reuse, but it is. I mean, we'd understand a no and certainly understand a yes. It's one of those things we thought it was worthy in bringing.
Well, actually, further down in the management update, there was a comment on the Pure Water Monterey, so we can talk about it then. But Pure Water Monterey is expanding their recycling efforts purifying efforts to treat agricultural runoff and other sources besides wastewater. Right. So it's not really even out of the question that we could eventually tap into some of that excess water too. That way, it wouldn't be explicitly a stormwater recharge, but it is actually maybe contributing to this and being part of a review of what's going on in the science.
Yeah, and we're not here to push it or sell it. We wouldn't bring it to you if we didn't think it was probably at least worth your consideration, but we didn't want to withhold it from you either when we get approached like this. There are some things that don't ever make the surface because I think we know you well enough to where we can, prevent some stuff, but this one made it.
So,
Michelle?
you want to hear from me?
Yes, of course.
I think it's really short-sighted not to consider stormwater as a source of water in the future. And if you want to have the networking and there's always partnership potentials that get developed. I know 10 years ago I went to a water reuse conference and everybody was shaking their heads saying this would never happen, and now here we are. And there's potential. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we got into this problem because we were losing recharge a little bit at a time and adding recharge areas that are stormwater and allowing stormwater to naturally recharge is not a, it's not a mistake. It's something that we should consider. And being in the forefront has its advantages.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm kind of mixed on this. Director Daniels makes a good point that it's in the Bay Area, and we're obviously a small player in it. But I don't think we should, whether we contribute to this or not, I still think that joint projects where there's multiple benefits, both the benefit to the groundwater basin and to handling stormwater, I think could happen in our future. So I'm kind of, torn on this one.
It seems like a small amount of money to.
It is.
Carla?
I'm tending to support it. I think I've really gotten a lot from attending the water reuse conferences and reaching out to and meeting other people at one of the conferences we went to a couple of years ago. I found them really educational, and it opened up horizons about the way that different agencies can work together, much the way some of our commenters have already said, to work together. And I think this is, I think it's worth having a profile at this conference.
Okay.
For a small amount of money.
Anyone want to make a motion?
Okay, I'll move.
Yes, did you have something?
Take any,
Oh yeah, public comment on this
public
issue,
comment?
sorry. How can I forget?
Thank you. Let me clarify. Is this just for discussion of this item?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
3.10.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Director Lather, for what you have said tonight, and I really support you in this leadership, including stormwater recharge as part of the mix for healing the basin, and it is supportive of your community water plan. Thank you. Your urban water management plan, too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Why would any of you neglect for an instant not to consider every opportunity to learn more about or to implement stormwater recovery and recharge? Why would you for an instant not do that, considering the rains we have and all the stormwater we see running out to the Pacific? Again, it's negligent for any of you not to say, yes, we're in favor of full stormwater recovery. Whether it's $5,000 or $2,500, it may or not, may be redundant. You spent $110,000 on a law firm recommendation by Mr. Basso without even knowing what you were buying. You did that a couple of sessions ago. I watched Mr. Basso a couple years ago
Can we focus on this issue, though?
What?
Can you
Yes,
focus on
this
this
issue.
issue,
It's
please?
on the number. It's on the issue of money. Okay, I'm
think you-
contrasting the $5,000 for the stormwater
Okay.
conference and the $110,000 you wasted on a law firm. You spent $110,000 in an instant, and you debate this. And for you to even delay implementing stormwater assessment and analysis for recovery here, again, is another act of negligence.
All right. Now we can entertain a motion.
Okay, I will move to contribute $2,500 to this conference.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, motion carries 3-2. Okay. Now, it is indeed time for oral communications for items not on tonight's agenda. So, now would be your time, Mr. Zamba.
Tom Stumbaugh, Aptos, pardon me for not understanding what's going on.
No worries, you got it. This is good.
It is my considered opinion that the district has no right to pollute the aquifer. Soquel Creek Water District does not own the aquifer, and we're not the only ones who use it. There's lots and lots of people out there using this water, and we have no right to pollute it for them, too. This approval business, as far as I'm concerned, is upside down. Whereas we failed to get 50% plus one to stop you from something not too long ago, it's my opinion that the approval business is upside down. That you should have to have 50% plus one of all the users to do something like you were proposing to do. Pure water Soquel, you write about it all the time, but it's not so pure. As sewer treatment plants issue effluent that is contaminated by all sorts of stuff people flush down the toilet. It is a proven fact that you cannot purify that water to the point that it doesn't contain these contaminants. So if you're gonna purify sewer water, so-called purify it, you're just going to be polluting the aquifer, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? An item not on tonight's agenda?
Of overall public comment, you've neglected to look at the aquifer proposal by Jerry Paul. And by the way, Bruce, I got the facts on whether or not aquifer was considered previously, and I found out from people who were on the city's panel, less than an hour was spent by a city engineer meeting with Jerry Paul. It was not adequately, truthfully, intellectually, honestly, nor ethically considered by them, nor by you guys, nor by the Mid-County Water Authority. You've neglected to consider aquifer, which would cost maybe $9 million at most, and which would solve the problem of adequate water for recharge. You've also neglected Mr. McGilvoy's analysis of the North Coast water supplies. Incredibly, preposterously negligent, profligate of this board and your management. Why do you want to waste $100 million of your ratepayers' money? And also, as the gentleman said, add polluted, contaminated water to the aquifer, which isn't necessary. There's adequate water from the river surface, which, by the way, Bruce, is cleaner, and there's adequate water from the North Coast water. McGilvoy proposal. You have not evaluated them, you've not considered them. You want to waste $100 million of your ratepayers' money for the next 30 years on something that is more toxic and more polluting and completely unnecessary. And again, we're back at stormwater. Why have you not recovered more stormwater? It's very disappointing. I hope 2 of you get elected. I regret it, because you're not holding him accountable for proper, efficient management. You're not holding your lawyer accountable not to waste your money on redundant, unnecessary $110 million fees for attorneys that aren't even necessary for a project you haven't even got the environmental impact approval through for the courts yet.
Anyone else?
Good evening. Thank you, Becky Steinbrunner. I want to first bring to your attention and to the public's attention a really good opportunity, 3 good opportunities coming up to learn more about the Mid-County Groundwater Basin Plan. The first will be this Thursday, April 18th at 5 p.m. at the Community Foundation. There will be an enrichment workshop put on by the Mid-County Groundwater Agency, and that is to discuss water use, projected water use, and population growth. And I think that should be very interesting. That's at the Community Foundation. The second one is Saturday, April 27th, 10 a.m. to noon and that is the Mid-County Groundwater Plan. Ms. Melanie Mao Shoemaker will be one of 3 speakers there, as will Darcy Pruitt from Mid-County Groundwater and Ms. Heidi Lukenbach from the Santa Cruz City. They'll be talking about the Mid-County Groundwater Plan, and that should be very interesting. That's free at the right here, Saturday, April 27th from 10 a.m. to noon. That's being sponsored by the League of Women Voters. And then the last one is one that I found out by attending your outreach committee meeting, and that will be Thursday, May 2nd, at the Downtown Library in Santa Cruz, 6 to 8 p.m., which is a citizen science, and Director Daniels and Mr. Duncan will be presenting a program called The Science of Water, and that promises to be very interesting. That's the Downtown Library, May 2nd, 6 to 8 p.m. So I just wanted to really thank you for that outreach into the community, and I'm looking forward to attending. In my collection of data for the legal efforts that I'm taking regarding the Pure Water Soquel CEQA violations, I've come across a study from Cabrillo College by hydrologist Haley Aldrich, where she is discussing analysis of the possible Cabrillo College injection well sites. Now, that site was not chosen for some reason. Instead, the district chose to benefit a public, or rather a private entity, Twin Lakes Church. But I think it's interesting to note on this study, quote, while epidemiological and toxicological studies have not revealed any negative public health implications of potable reuse, that's from the National Water Reuse Institute in 2015, the long-term health effects of exposure to low levels of CECs and a mixture of CECs are still not well understood. Future risk and epidemiological studies are still needed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing about the enrichment session. It's also going to be available as a webinar. So the link should be on the Mid-County Groundwater Agency
All
website.
3 of them, or?
No, the enrichment session that's this Thursday at 5. I don't know about the one that's here.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. So, but anyway, that one will be a webinar as well. So, okay. Any board member oral communications?
Well, some things I wanted to mention. Let's talk about the Aquifer program. Something was mentioned about that. And if the city did look at it, maybe that was not adequate, maybe it was, but if the city looked at it and decided not to pursue it, then it's dead as far as we're concerned, because the aquifer, the lock is owned by the city, the water in it is owned by the city, the water in the river, the city has water rights to it, we don't, and so if the city does not decide to pursue it for whatever reason, then we can't pursue it. There is nothing to pursue. It doesn't exist. It's like, going and trying to tow glaciers down, icebergs down here. You just can't, do something just because you want to do it. You have to have it. In fact, if you look at Chapter 7 of the EIR, the first page of that talks about, it quotes the EIR regulations, the CEQA regulations, and says that, the only thing that is viable has to be something that's under the control of the party that's doing the EIR. And so none of those, the North Coast is not under our control either. So none of those can be part of the EIR because we have no control over them. If the city were to ever offer them up and say, let's do it and you want to join us, then we could consider it. But without that, we're just speculating into the wind. So, and in terms of water quality, you should look at the water quality of the river that they propose to send to us. There are thousands of septic systems up that river. When I was on the regional board, we put the county on notice. We did a total maximum daily load requirement, which specifies how much is allowed for nitrate in that river. And why is that nitrate in the river? Because all those septic systems all the way up there, some of them are 50, 60 years old, they haven't been maintained. Every time they flush their toilets, if they're pills, and certainly, the the nitrate in the pee or whatever, all that stuff leaks into the river. And so the levels in that river are, some of these constituents are up to 100 times higher than we have them here in the groundwater. And the water quality from a pure water system is even lower than our groundwater in terms of constituents. So you're just wrong.
And I think a lot of water systems throughout the world are based on rivers that have something else coming into them upstream. I mean, that's a common problem. So, any other board comments for oral communications?
Yeah, I was told about a situation the Soquel Creek Water District contributes to the county's monitoring of the salmonid fisheries population as part of it's part of the stewardship of the watershed. And so we've been contributing to that and supporting the collection of doing fish counts. And I just wanted to give a heads up that this Thursday, I guess everything's happening this Thursday, but the San Lorenzo Water Valley Water District is planning to review their budget, and they're considering cutting out the funds to support monitoring of that part of the watershed. And I was going to urge people to either go to the meeting or write a letter, and I wanted to put it up to the board to consider that Soquel Water District would send a letter in support of their continuing their fish monitoring program in San Lorenzo Valley. And this oral it just came up far too last minute to consider it as an action item. So I'm just calling it out to people that not only are people wanting the water that comes out of that river and the North Coast streams, but the fish really have already been, the fish population's been declining, even though they've been monitored, and that's how we know they're declining. So they're not only people want that water, but the fish and the aquatic habitat need that water also. So it's really going to end up being a balancing act on all the needs of all the people in this watershed. So I think it's something that people who are concerned about the San Lorenzo River should pay attention to.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bruce.
So of course I'm concerned about water quality. I have a family. I drink the water, they drink the water. Neighbors drink the water. I don't want to have anything in the water that would harm them. So I went back and looked again on our website. We've got information from the expert panel. And one of the things I looked at is to see if there's bias there. And I didn't detect that. I also looked at the facts and what they were saying about whether it was safe or not, and they said it was safe. So I urge others to go to our websites, and the actual meeting I think is on there as well as the report. So if you have concerns like I do about the safety of the water, I encourage you to go there and look at those links, because I think you'll probably end up like I did, feeling like the water is safe.
All right, anyone else? Okay, then let's move on to item 5.1, which is a management update.
Yeah, I'll go first for Conservation Customer Service Field. I just wanted to add one thing. I reported in here that we sent out a request for a proposal for a contractor to replace our AMR registers with AMI registers, and that bid closes tomorrow, and we have gotten 2 bids in so far, so we're excited about that. Thanks.
Good.
Any other questions about the
Conservation, customer service? Okay. Then shall we move to engineering?
Good evening. The Just last week, we did pour the pedestal, concrete pedestal at the Granite Way well. And so while that's curing, the contractor is preparing to bring up the pump. And they'll be putting that in the next week or two. That's also part of that effort is acquiring the electrical panel, and that is still ongoing. They're basically we're in the process of reviewing submittals for that. But that project is moving forward, and Mike Wilson is leading that one up. The pilot recharge well at Twin Lakes Church is moving forward and is on schedule. We did have a little incident yesterday at the site, which was an unsafe situation where a resident was driving by and filming with a video camera while driving. The crew is concerned as they're working in the street, trying to mobilize in and out of there, that the drivers are not paying attention. So I did get notified of that.
Okay.
But we will make sure to stop those drivers and make them pay attention if that's needed. I'm going to let Christine summarize the transfer with the city, the purchase through the O'Neill Intertie. But that is ongoing, and we're coordinating with the state for next winter and trying to look ahead, as well as touching base with the city staff to think of beyond next winter and what we can do for the next steps after that.
And that plan stops at the end of this month, correct?
That's right. Yeah, April 30th, we'll have to close the intertie valve, and we won't dissolve. I don't believe we're going to dissolve the isolated system immediately. We may, I'm not sure. We will continue to sample water quality for at least 3 more months.
And then next year would be the last winter we could go on this particular agreement, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
The last full winter.
Right, and then there's a month or so, 2 months.
Okay.
In 2020.
2020 then. Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, the Granite Way well, what unit is that pumping from? Will it be pumping from
The BC.
Okay. Approximate depth?
700?
700 feet?
Yeah, there's a seal down to at least 400 feet.
Okay.
So the upper strata is sealed off.
Okay.
The Prisma F and the DEF is sealed off.
Okay. Because I know there was some concern about possible surface contamination getting into that, and it's at 700 feet and sealed to 400 feet. That seems
highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Right. We will, like I said before, we will comply with the state's sampling that's needed to put that well online.
Okay.
This is a dumb question. I was looking at the Chrome 6 update, and it just said Black and Veatch has archived the project to preserve it. I was just wondering what.
Well, I did
that
actually
means
update.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's a good. I'm glad you looked at that. I did actually update that item. We did hear that the U.S. EPA is revising, or they're looking at the effort for risk assessment. Unfortunately, I think that effort, because there's the national limit and then there's the California limit. Unfortunately, this effort is probably not going to be finished. And in that effort, they're going to look at all the other studies that have been done by Canada. And we're not thinking that it's going to be finished in time for the state to carry out their reissuance of the draft MCL. When I say they've archived it, I meant they packaged it in a manner that they can pick it back up and resume where we left off if that's where we need to go. Basically organized all the files so that they're this was done years ago when we got word from the state that they were challenged and lost that lawsuit. We did hear that they're planning to do affordability workshops, because that's the one of the reasons that the state lost the lawsuit is they
Oh.
didn't adequately assess the affordability of the MCL. When I asked our local DDW rep, they were unaware of those workshops. The rumor was that it was going to happen in May, and so we're trying to get as much information as we can about those because we want to attend them. But again, the last update on the website was March of 2018. So still kind of quiet, but we're monitoring it as best we can.
Well, yeah. At the last Aqua conference, the head of DWR said they were not going to do it this year.
Okay.
They wouldn't come up with a new standard probably until next year, so.
Okay.
It's a funny thing to wait on.
Yeah. There's a long list of water services. Some of those are, about 15 of them are just fire sprinklers. So I don't want you to get, worried about that. Those don't add demand to the system. Of course, any of the other water services, they are going through the water demand offset program. And so our staff's busy administering these installations. Any questions?
No, it's nice that it looks like some people have taken you up on the downsizing of the meters, so that sounds like that's helping some people. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go on to operations and maintenance. It'll be at the end.
As Taj mentioned, and I think Dr. Daniels did as well, that the water transfer will end in 2 weeks on April 30th, and we're going to continue to monitor for 3 more months. We did have our triennial sanitary survey done by the state last week. It's not completed. They spent 2 days out in the field going to all of our facilities and have not performed the inspections for all of them. And we did have a sit down with staff for document review. And we are going to be taking Ironwood tank offline next week for repairs. So that'll start Wednesday through Friday. The repairs will be done, then there'll be a curing time, and then we'll get that tank back online as soon as possible. Any other questions?
Questions? All right, thanks, Christine. Melanie, I think you're next up.
Besides what's already in the report, just one thing to add. We did have a meeting today with the Santa Cruz County Public Works, and we are going to be receiving the 60% design for the bike pedestrian crossing that's there at Chanticleer Avenue and Soquel Avenue. So that effort is moving forward. And we also, the outreach team is working on doing some additional outreach in that area. We're looking at some potential dates and locations, so we'll get back to the board when those have been scheduled. And then just wanted to inform the board that last weekend, staff did attend the open house at the Santa Cruz wastewater treatment facility. We brought the Pure Water Soquel trailer down there. It was a very nice event. We got a lot of great feedback from the neighbors there. Many of them who are very aware of the Pure Water Soquel project and have been following the project and asking good questions.
Great. Question?
A lot of very supportive, I think everybody was.
Yeah, it was, everybody that I talked to was very supportive of the project. I actually had one person that did come up to me and was talking about maximizing surface water and the water quality of surface water. And just as I was starting to share and give some information, there was actually 2 other people that chimed in, and peer-to-peer was an education that was happening on that level.
Great. That's wonderful. Thank you. Any
Thanks for doing
questions from the board?
No.
All right, then let's see. I don't see Leslie, so who's doing finance?
I'll take that tonight. That for Leslie. She is working on the Tyler system tonight, and so she thought you wouldn't mind if she stayed there and kept that crew running, and you can see all the outreach that's going to. It's a huge lift. It's kind of like our central nervous system, and they're making that happen, and we're slowly transitioning to go to it. And we think it's going to be a good thing. So she's at home, so to speak.
Okay. Yeah. Home office. All right. Questions about finance?
Is that new software up and running yet?
Some of it is, some components. Yeah,
And is the intention then to run two systems in parallel for some time?
they are doing that on some of the billing to test it. Yeah, to do it, make sure it's all going right. But we're doing timesheets, purchase orders, kind of internally doing stuff. They've been testing some stuff. So yeah, they are going to do. I think it's one payroll period. I'm not one payroll, but one month's worth of billing to make sure in parallel that it's all
identical.
copacetic.
Yes.
Yeah, they're very precise.
Detail
They're
oriented.
accountants.
Yes.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions about finance? It looks like there's no human resources report, so Ron, back to you.
I have three things I'll just bring up. I know last week, it was just our last meeting. We were just coming off the heels of that April 1st meeting in Santa Cruz, and subsequent to that, they had an article in the Sentinel, and I just pulled out 4 of the quotes, and because it just seems to be some confusion about this, and so I want to show you what the Sentinel reported and what was stated at the meeting. I'll just read those 4. So this is about the Water Supply Advisory Committee meeting with the Water Commission and getting an update on how much water is available and costs and that sort of thing, where they're at. And then you can see the first bullet. It says, in no case can Santa Cruz consistently provide enough of an annual water supply to directly to Soquel Creek Water District's customers to meet the 1,500 acre-feet annual supplemental demand year after year, according to Gary Fisk. And he's the one that runs that model. Now, on the bright side, there is some water available, pretty reliably, around 300 acre-feet, which we're excited about. Second one, were the city to provide some supply to Soquel Creek, city's water costs are not likely to be cheaper than that of Pure Water Soquel's project, using very preliminary estimates according to Rosemary Menard, the city director. Third, our cost of production is going to be dramatically affected by the amount of money we're investing in the backbone infrastructure and even financed over a 30-year period. The amount of revenue that we have to generate to support the debt is going to have to get distributed over all the water that we sell, Ms. Menard said. And and I applaud them. That's a tough road to hoe. We saw the D+ or D- on the infrastructure, but they're biting the bullet and doing what's right. You have to have that. And then the third one is our fourth bullet item, thank you. I think Dr. Daniels alluded to this last meeting. Ongoing pilot testing of how much water stored in underground aquifers can later be recovered for city use suggests as much as 25% supply loss compared to their earlier projection of 20%. So, that I thought Jessica York did a good job of capturing the essence of the meeting as it kind of relates to us. She did a fair shake on that one. Then the second item, there was some misinformation presented last week, or at least I interpreted it, so I was curious. It sounded like to me one of the members of the public was saying that Pure Water Monterey, which is about 95% complete, was being not pursued, and they were going to desalinization. And maybe they were confused because early on, the idea, just to give you the background before I jump directly into this, desalinization was to be the main project with potentially backup using recycled water, purified water. And when they got to look at cost and water quality and that sort of thing, they decided that they would move forward with Pure Water Monterey, the recycled. So it switched, and now the desal portion is even in a much lesser supporting role to the recycled, purified portion. And as Director Christensen said, the Pure Water Monterey project is not just treated sewage water, effluent. It's actually taking in agricultural runoff and other things because the treatment system is so robust on the purification end of it. So Cal-Am, though, however, is while they're investing in looking at the expansion of Pure Water Monterey, they want to continue to pursue evaluating the desalinization, even though you can see the cost is about twice as much more, but they feel that's more in their wheelhouse, I guess, and want to do that. So I just wanted to clear that up because I was curious and confused at the same time, so I went and talked to people and looked that up. And then, you know, sometimes it's good to take a second and go, where have we gone? I mean, an example is I discovered 3 letters recently that the board has written to the city. This is back in time. I think it went back to like even 2012 or 14, where you said, hey, if you have water, you know, let's talk. When you find out if you have some excess water, and then there was another letter and a third one. I thought that was interesting to see that in the archives as I was going through stuff. But I also came across this headline, right? Shelley, can you do that for me? And it just made me realize how far we've come and that we're still pursuing what our customers wanted. This is a headline in the Sentinel from after some of the meetings we had. And again, I thought a quote from the paper really summed it up well, was general discussions and summaries at the events end revealed that attendees thought conservation measures alone would not suffice into the future, and that water was too cheap at 2 cents a gallon, and replenishing the aquifers with recycled water was most favored. Now, I know the board at this time, even though our community said move forward with recycle, you kept all options on the table, but this was their favored. And you know, to tell you the truth, I'd forgot about this article until I saw it come up. So, if you remember back, when exactly was that?
5 years later.
2015, June. So, while back, I think we've come a long ways, and you know, you took that to heart, what the customers wanted, you evaluated it, you brought on experts. So I just wanted to share that. Sometimes it's worth taking a moment to pause.
Yeah,
Thank you.
All right, that's all for the management update. Any public comment on the management update?
Thank you, Becky Steinbrunner. My comments are primarily about the engineering report. I wanted to clarify, it sounded like the Granite Way well, because of geology, is basically sealed to 400 feet. I wanted to clarify that, and Director Jaffe, thank you for your concern and attention to the potential contamination, because most likely it is there, and it's not, perhaps not the panel of contaminants that one would normally test for. And I will provide you with results of the contamination and remediation contaminants that were found at the Aptos Village project with removal of the fuel tank, underground fuel tank. That low threat case closure was prematurely closed, and there was no groundwater monitoring at that site. So I am concerned about the Granite Way well. I would like clarification about how deep that well will be sealed. Second of all, I want to just note that I see the Aptos Village storm drain may require the district to move your water service lines, and I would like to know when that work might begin. Thirdly, I have questions about the Twin Lakes Church well, and just want to voice my, because I do video that, but I never drive by while I'm filming. I stop and park and even get out of the car. So I'm not causing a hazard.
Okay.
And I also wondered about the source of the water that has been used at that project recently. It's been being brought in trucks. I've observed that. And I want to know the source of the water, where those trucks are filling up, and why the hydrant is not being used at Twin Lakes Church as was described in the environmental impact work review process. And again, note that the water that is effluent coming from that well is very, very warm and is very, very turbid. And I guess that's all. Let's see. Regarding the finance report, I did note that I'm happy to see that it will include direct verbal communication to customers who call into the billing department over the next 2 months. I think you're going to be hearing a lot from people. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify one thing, so whatever the contamination at the Aptos Village site, you know, even if it went down into the surface aquifers, we're talking about a well that's drilled to 700 feet, and then there's no way for anything to get to it for 400 feet down. It's sealed to that level, so it's really protected. Okay. Yeah. Some shallow aquifer sitting on top could be contaminated, but that's not where the drinking water is coming from.
And if you understand the sampling, they sample, remediate, sample till it's clean soil,
right,
and then below that. So
we're both. That's
yeah,
a
you're both
regional board.
I know. I dealt with you many times on the other side of the fence. So,
all right.
but yeah, the process.
Okay. So on the questions on or comments on management update.
I'm not sure that Ms. Steinbrenner's concerns mentioned some weeks ago have been addressed regarding the Twin Lakes well, regarding the Granite well. You were going to have a test performed or have your staff get one accomplished. I'm not sure those results have been made available. So you might want to comply fully with Ms. Steinbrenner's concerns being addressed. I would underscore that.
Thank you. All right, next item is the district council oral report.
Really nothing new to report. The Glendale case was denied by the Supreme Court. They did not take it, which is somewhat of a surprise and a disappointment. And the Santa Barbara case was not published.
Could you remind me what that case is, the Glendale?
Glendale was a case involving rates. Glendale had water rates, city of Glendale, and they had tiered rates, and there was a rather strange Court of Appeal decision, but it was not taken by the Supreme Court, so it's sitting out there in the second district. Santa Barbara was a case involving rates and the question of whether you had to notify property owners, despite the fact that a government code says you can only notify customers if you want to. And that case was not a published decision, and therefore it's not precedent. And there was a request made by several agencies to the Supreme Court to have it published, but the Supreme Court refused to do so. So we're kind of back in limbo waiting now.
Okay, thank you. Next item is item 6.1, conditional and unconditional will serve letters.
Hi, good evening. We have two will serves for conversion ADUs, accessory dwelling units that are attached or converted from an existing structure. Both have paid the 10% offset for the water demand offset. We do have one of the applicants in the audience if you have any questions related to them.
Okay, any questions? No questions, thank you. Any public comment on this item? Okay, so what's your pleasure, Lord?
I'll make the motions to approve.
Okay,
I'll second them.
moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, let's go to item 6.2, the O&M building roof replacement bid award.
Yes, I have been working on getting bids for replacement of several roofs, a couple of backwash tanks, and also for the O&M building. When I received our informal bids, I realized that the bids for the O&M building roof replacement came out over $25,000, and according to district policy, that's normally bid out formally. I considered taking a formal bid back to the board, but that would delay the process significantly, and we would not be able to get the work done this fiscal year. So I did bring this to the board to consider waiving the normal formal bid process and accepting the 2 bids that I did receive. I contacted 5 contractors in Santa Cruz and Monterey County that perform prevailing wage jobs. There's not that many of them, and 3 came out to look at it, and only 2 wanted to provide the bid. One thing I do have to note, I became aware recently that for district jobs or government entity jobs over $25,000, the contractor needs to supply a payment bond. So the estimate on the price for a payment bond is probably no more than 5%. So I would like to amend the Noble Pride Roofing bid at $42,179 to add another $2,100 to that, for a total of $44,288. So if you have any questions.
Questions?
Oh,
Okay.
that's long overdue.
Yeah. All right. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none?
I will make both motions with that change.
Okay.
I'll second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is item 6.3. I think Ron, this one's yours.
Yeah, Melanie's gonna take this.
Or Melanie? Okay.
Sure. Ron, you can chime in if you want to go.
Sorry.
So the item before you is item 6.3, which is, again, is to update the board on the preliminary design efforts of the treatment facilities for Pure Water Soquel, and also to consider taking action at this time. Primarily, the purpose of this memo is to summarize the efforts that have gone on thus far related to the treatment facilities for Pure Water Soquel, starting with just a little bit of background again, that on December 18th, the board did approve the Pure Water Soquel project and prioritized that we site the tertiary components at the Santa Cruz Wastewater Treatment Facility and the Advanced Water Purification Facilities off-site at the Chanticleer site, while also doing some coordination with the City of Santa Cruz to see if there was potential to do the full purification at their wastewater treatment facility site. Following that, in February, we presented to the board an item for up to 2 basis of design reports and an optional preliminary design for 2 basis of design reports. And the board approved that and asked staff to come back on March 5th to give an update. At that March 5th meeting, we did provide an update in terms of the actions that had been underway in terms of coordinating with the City of Santa Cruz staff. Many meetings had occurred. We discussed with them the potential pros and cons of having a split facility as well as the full facility down there. And based on those efforts and the desire of the city to continue with the tertiary component down at Santa Cruz, recognizing the construction impacts that they were going to be having down at the wastewater treatment plant with their capital improvement projects, as well as being in alignment with their Water Supply Advisory Committee and expanding the potential for tertiary. They provided us a letter reaffirming that they had the desire to pursue tertiary down at the site and affirm that they would provide secondary effluent to us. So at that March 5th meeting, we did report to the board that, as well as some of the other efforts related to outreach that had been underway at the Chanticleer, and that we were going to go forward with some development of the basis of design reports. Subsequent to that, what we wanted to do today then is to just clarify. I know there was some confusion that was expressed by a member of the public related to the action, and so tonight's action is just to have the board make a motion that we are pursuing the basis of design report, and that what is underway at this point is the split facility with tertiary down at Santa Cruz, purification at Chanticleer, and that we are working very hard at coming next month with a project agreement with the City of Santa Cruz.
Okay. Questions?
I was a little
Rochelle?
confused. So is there a basis of design report that we're approving, or we're just approving moving forward with it?
You already approved the basis of design funding, and to go forward with it. In February. And that is why originally in the March, there was no action that was needed because you guys had already taken that action.
But we're just approving doing it.
Doing
There-
one,
Just
not
doing
two.
one.
Just doing one.
Doing one.
Yep.
Because it sounds like we're confirming approval of a report that we have, and I was a little
The
confused
December
about that.
18th.
December 18th was
Yep.
the formal approval of the project.
But what we're motioning is not to approve the report, it's to approve moving forward with just one of them.
Right. So confirms its approval of the basis of design report, which you've already done that already.
I think it would be approval of proceeding with the basis of design report
For one.
for, right.
Yeah,
So I
'cause-
think
It was left out of the motion. That's what was.
in the motion, the way the
I just
motion's
want to make sure I
worded.
didn't miss something.
Yeah,
'cause
I looked,
I
I looked for
read
the,
it a couple of times.
I looked for the attachment.
And it wasn't there.
It wasn't there.
There's
yeah.
no
It hadn't happened
Right, so
yet.
just the way it's worded in the actual motion, I think
So
it should
let's
say.
make sure when you motion it, it's clear on the motion. Okay,
Right,
thanks.
okay, but
Okay.
before we do any motioning,
Okay.
we need to have an opportunity for public comment.
Thank you, Becky Steinbruner. I see on page 199 of your packet, the last paragraph, it says, when you're describing, after you describe the action that your board did take on March 5th on an informational update item, it says, subsequent to the March 5th meeting, a member of the public expressed comments regarding item 6.4 agenda description and approval via a motion. Accordingly, for transparency and for clarity, a motion concerning the board's direction that staff continue to pursue the split facility configuration design is now before the board for its consideration. So thank you for curing and correcting the violation of the Brown Act, because that's what this
previous
is.
motion.
There
That's
was-
what it says.
But
They are now doing a motion, just
You
so,
just
so you
There was no
understand what you're
previous
reading.
motion.
thank you.
Okay. I'm looking. Yes, sir.
Since I was the one that asked this to be brought back for a formal action, I would like to make the motion.
I will second it.
By motion, confirm its approval of proceeding with the design of basis report and to initiate ... Because we are not approving a
you.
report, we're
Okay.
proceeding with the report.
Check.
Okay? That's my motion.
That is, I'm seconding. That's great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thanks for
Um,
doing this, crossing the
you.
T and dotting the I.
And then, there's written communication, any comments on that? Public comment on that?
Thank you, Becky Steinbruner. I submitted 2 pieces of written correspondence and have not received any response at all from anyone. That would have been helpful for tonight to help me understand, but I also would especially like to make sure that someone does respond to my comments on the updated community water plan and answers my questions, especially regarding the sources of the 123 TCP reported in your water quality reports. So thank you. I'll look forward to the written response to both of those pieces of communication. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, then the meeting, wait. This is commenting on just this written communication.
7.1, that's Ms. Steinbrenner's communication.
Okay.
And she's got 7 items that she's asking you to address. I underscore her request for those, and I'm disappointed you haven't done so.
Okay, thank
Please
you.
do so. Please comply with the Brown Act.
To be clear, the Brown Act is oral communication. It's not an order or something that she requires that we have to do. You know, paint ourselves green and jump off of a bridge. She can't do that. She can make a comment, and we may respond or we may not. The
Okay,
Brown Act
so-
does not require us to respond.
Okay, anyway, let's move to adjournment. We are going to adjourn to a closed session. And does anyone have any comments on the closed session?
Thank you. Yes, I do. Thank you for allowing comment on the closed session items. First of all, I'd like to ask if there will be anything reportable at the end of this closed session.
If there's action taken, or
We always report
Right.
after a closed session, but sometimes it's just gave direction. It's not,
Heard information.
there's not any,
Right. And does the community television record
No.
when you do
It's a closed
give
session.
reportable action?
if it's,
No, I don't think they do.
it'll be in the
I
minutes
think
what
they
the,
open it up again, but it's in the minutes.
Okay.
it will be in the minutes what the report out is.
All right, thank
Okay.
you. So I would like to comment on item 8.1, the case 19CV00181, the petition for CEQA writ of mandate against the district. I am proceeding with that action, and I really do appreciate Ms. Olin's hard work and other staff, I'm sure, in helping me gather the materials for the administrative record. That is a huge job. It's a long process, and I really want to thank you, Ms. Olin, for your help and patience with me. I am pursuing this vigorously. I am close to the end of amending the petition to correct some errors and add information. And I also want to say that I may take action to rescind, if you will, my agreement to the stipulation to postpone the preliminary injunctive hearing. I did not understand when your attorney, Ms. Ouellette from Best and Krieger, asked me to sign the stipulation that extended the timeline for the administrative record, that the preliminary injunctive hearing was not tied to the certification of the administrative record, and I'm learning a lot. So just a heads up, I may take some action on that to set that forward, and thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you and good night. We'll now go to closed session. Please clear the room.